Good evening. I trust you had a fruitful day. I do not say happy, though I hope it has been happy. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samba sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samba sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samba sambuddhassa. Homage to the Buddha, the blessed, noble, and fully self-awakened one. Just before we carry on with the teachings of the Buddha around karma, I got a question about why I say at the end of a session, a moment's reflection and then resolution. So this is for those of you, who started afterwards, started later, should we say. So the idea is that after you finish your sitting, you just look back over that period and just ask yourself, were you really committed to being in the present moment, or weren't you really? I mean, you allowed yourself to indulge in certain things. How did you deal with the hindrances that came up? Was a lot of dullness and lethargy? How did you deal with it? Did you know what to do? Things like that. And sometimes you can look back and recognize that you've been aware of that process of desiring. It's become a bit more clearer to you, or impermanence, or this idea of not under my control, a sense of distance from what you're experiencing. That's the anatta. And then the resolution would be connected with that. So, for instance, if you found yourself falling asleep, so you say to yourself, right, okay, next time I fall asleep, I'll immediately open my eyes. Remember, you can open them just slightly, let a bit of light in, but if you're still nodding away, you can open them bright, let the light in. And of course, you can stand up. So that's the idea. And the purpose is eventually, of course, to be able to guide ourselves. So that's the purpose of it, to become a very self-directed practice after a while. So that's what we're doing at the end of a sitting. Okay, don't want to forget that. So what we've covered so far is the basic statement that the Buddha makes about karma. We are owners of our karma. We are heirs to our actions. Whatever we do, we'll get the results. We're born of our actions, and we're bound by them, bound to them. And the actions, if they're good, is actually our refuge. And an action, and the actions is what distinguishes inferior to superior people, morally speaking, that is. So action here is the direct translation of the word kamma, K-A-M-M-A, action. The result is vipaka. But these days, of course, we use the word karma with an R, K-A-R-M-A, really to point to results, to consequences. But in the Buddha's understanding, kamma is an action. And remember this distinction between a desire and then the empowerment of it. So that's why he says, I say it is will that is the action. You cannot distinguish will from the action. The will is the power that you put into a desire to make it manifest. So one example would be throwing a stone. Once you've thrown the stone, you've put the power in the stone. You can't separate the power from the stone. It's just there. It's part and parcel of the stone, you see. So it's the same with an action, either of the mind or speech or body. Hold on, I'm losing my place here. So that was the first thing. Now, conjoined with that, we have this idea that not everything that happens to us is the product of our personal karma. I mean, it's pretty obvious, really. Just the natural law, the law of genetics, and basically what we end up with through birth of our bodies, the way the brain's structured and everything. and the society we live in. So a lot is already given, and within that sort of maze, every day, virtually throughout the day, we have to make decisions about how to behave, and that is creating our future results. So if we link that also with that law that we explained before, dependent origination, that law, if you remember it, idapachayata, because that happened in the past, this happens now. Because that didn't happen, this doesn't happen. Because this happens now, that happens now. Because this doesn't happen now, that doesn't happen now. So remember the combination of a linear causality, something that's coming from the past and is affecting the present and the future, of course, and the immediacy of certain lines of karma coming together to produce these singular, discrete events that we call our life. So now we move on to the next one, which is the greater exposition of karma. And it starts off with a conversation between a man called Pataliputra, that translates as the son of Patali. And he's come across this monk, Samidi. And he says, "Friend Samidi, I heard and learned from the recluse Gautama's own lips, right? Bodily action is vain, verbal action is vain, only mental action is real." So this is a misunderstanding of the Buddha's teachings. He puts primacy on the mind because everything begins in the mind. Begins as an idea and then an intention. And so if we're aware of what's happening in the mind, we can obviously determine what's going to come through our speech and our actions. But he doesn't say that they're not real, far from it. And then he says that there is that attainment on entering upon which one does not feel anything at all. So there he's talking about Nibbana. Anyway, do not say that, Pataliputra. Do not say that. This is what Samidi the monk says, you see. It's not good to misrepresent the Blessed One. The Blessed One did not say that. And there is an attainment on entering in which does not, but there is an attainment on entering which one does not feel anything at all. And then this Pataliputra says, "How long have you been in the order? How long since you went forth?" "Oh, not long, friends, 3 years. Oh, now what shall I say to the elder bhikkhus when a young bhikkhu thinks the teacher is to be defended thus?" Now, I can't quite understand what Pataliputra is saying there, because surely Samidi knows enough about Dharma to defend the teacher. So then he says, "Friend, what, having done an intentional act by way of body, speech, and mind, what does one feel?" Having done an intentional act by way of body, speech, and mind, one feels suffering, says Pataliputra. And then, neither approving nor disapproving, with the Venerable Samidi's words, the wanderer Pataliputra rose from his seat and departed. So now, of course, the Buddha doesn't say from an intentional act one feels suffering, right? This is taken out of context. What the Buddha says is that all life is unsatisfactory, and therefore, in a sense, in that way, it's dukkha, right? It will not give us full satisfaction. But obviously, it's not true to say that one feels suffering from bodily actions, speech, and whatnot, because of course we feel happy and joyful sometimes. So now, soon after Pataliputra had left, the Venerable Samidi went to the Venerable Ananda, and they exchanged courteous and amiable talk. He told him what Pataliputra had said, and Ananda said, "Oh, we better go and see the Blessed One about this." So they go and see the Blessed One, and they tell him everything. He says, "Ananda, I do not even recall ever having seen this wanderer, Pataliputra." So he looks as though he is also a wandering ascetic, Pataliputra. So how could there have been any conversation? So what the Buddha thinks that this Pataliputra has had some conversation with him and got it all wrong. And then he says, though the wanderer Pataliputra's question should have been analyzed before being answered, this misguided man answered one-sidedly. So he's talking about Samidi here, you see, misguided man. And with this, the Venerable Udayin said to the Blessed One, Venerable Sir, perhaps the Venerable Samidi spoke referring to the principle, whatever is felt is suffering. So again, this is referring to the Buddha's wider statement concerning life as being unsatisfactory. And the Blessed One says, see, Ananda, how this misguided man Udayin interferes. And then he starts to explain what it is. Friend, this is what you should have said, right? So he says, this is what you should have said. Friend Pataliputa, having done an intentional action by way of body, speech, and mind to be felt as pleasant, one feels pleasure. Having done an intentional action by way of body, speech, and mind to be felt as painful, one feels pain. And having done an intentional speech of mind by way of which is felt as neither pleasant nor unpleasant, then one feels neutral feelings. But who are these foolish, thoughtless wanderers that could understand the Tathagata's great exposition and action? So it sounds like the Buddha's showing off here, like, you know, who are they to understand what I have to say? So anyway, then he's asked to expound on his teachings, and he says, attend closely to what I shall say, Ananda. So he says, yes, I will. Now, he says there are four, this is the basic opening statement. There are four kinds of persons. Here, some person kills living beings, takes what is given, misconducts himself in sensual pleasures, speaks falsehood, speaks maliciously, speaks harshly and gossips, covetous, a mind of ill will, and holds wrong views. On the dissolution of the body after death, he reappears in a state of deprivation, in an unhappy destination, in perdition, even in hell. But such a person who does this can also reappear in a happy destination, even a heavenly realm. And then a person who abstains from killing and all the rest of it, he on the dissolution of body reappears in a happy destination. But some person behaving exactly the same, abstaining from killing and all that, on the dissolution of the body appears in a state of deprivation, an unhappy destination in perdition and in hell. So now he says, Ananda, by means of ardor, endeavor, and devotion, diligence, and right attention, there are some recluses and Brahmins attain such concentration of mind that when the mind is concentrated with the divine eye, meaning that they can see beyond the physical sight, which is purified and surpasses humans, the human, he sees the person who has killed living beings, etc., etc., and he sees that on the dissolution of the body, they reappear in a state of deprivation, state of hell. And he says this, indeed, there are evil actions and there are results of misconduct. For I saw a person who has killed living beings, etc., etc., and on the dissolution of the body ended up in hell. And then he says, this is the recluse who can see these things. On the dissolution of the body, everybody who kills, holds wrong views, etc., etc., and those who thus know rightly, those who think otherwise, all those people who have acted in this terrible way, they all go to hell. And those who know thus rightly, those who think otherwise are mistaken. In other words, this is the truth, I've got it right, and everybody else is wrong. Only this is true, anything else is wrong. So everybody who commits any of these heinous crimes will go to hell. Now, so he says that the same of anybody who is now some other recluse who has this ability sees the opposite, that somebody who has committed all these crimes ends up in heaven. And I saw a person who killed, etc., and I see that on the dissolution of the body after death, he reappears in a happy realm. So therefore, he says that there is no consequence to actions, because it doesn't matter what you do, you end up in heaven anyway. And then he says this happens to everybody, and so only this is right, and everything else is wrong. So now we have the opposite, somebody who actually holds to right views and abstains from all that horrible stuff reappears in a heavenly realm. And so this person who has this divine eye, this ability to see beyond human sight, says on the destination, the dissolution of the body after death, everyone who abstains from all these terrible things goes to heaven, goes to a happy destination. Those who know thus know rightly, those who think otherwise are mistaken. Only this is true, everything else is wrong. And of course, you have the opposite. Here we have people who have abstained from all that terrible stuff, and they end up in deprivation, in a hell realm. And again, these people who have this ability, who only see that, say that everybody who abstains from killing and all that will end up in hell. And he obstinately adheres to what he himself has known, seen, and discovered, insists only this is true, everything else is wrong. So now, there in Ananda, when a recluse or Brahmin says, indeed, there are evil actions and there are results of misconduct, so I grant him that. When he says, I saw a person who killed living beings, etc., and appeared now, I grant him that. But when he says that this happens to everybody, I do not grant him this. Okay? And so the same with the others. Indeed, there are no evil actions. Sorry, a person who commits evil actions and then ends up in heaven, you see, such a recluse or Brahmin will say, indeed, there are no evil actions as such. There are no results of misconduct. The Buddha says, I do not grant him this. And when he says, I saw a person who killed living beings and who end up in a heavenly world, that I grant him. Okay, that is true. But when he says that everyone who kills, etc., ends up in a happy destination, I don't grant him that. I don't agree with that. So now we have indeed, there are good actions. So this is the other view. There are good actions. There are good results of conduct. If somebody says that, and they end up in a happy realm, so I grant him that. But when he says everybody who does good actions ends up in a heavenly realm, then I do not grant him that. And it's the same with the other one. When they say, indeed, there are no good actions and no results of good actions, because whatever you do, you end up in hell. So I don't grant him that. And this isn't true. And when he says this is true for everybody, of course, I don't grant him that. Okay. So what's the teaching here? There in Ananda, as to the person who kills living beings and holds wrong view on the dissolution of the body, deprivation, etc., goes to hell. Or either earlier he did an evil action to be felt as painful, or later he did an evil action to be felt as painful, or at the time of death he acquired and took wrong view. So somebody who has done evil deeds during their lives and has the wrong view that this is what they ought to be doing, or that it's not so bad doing this sort of stuff, or that they can get away with it, then on the dissolution of the body, they might go to hell. And since he has killed human beings, he will experience the result of that either here and now, or in the next rebirth, or in subsequent existence. So what the Buddha is saying is, when we have done some action, you don't actually know when the result will come through, right? And so in terms of even in this life, a thief might think he's got away with it, but then the everlasting elastic hand of the law finally finds him, and he's put in jail as an old man. So it's not as though you don't know you don't know when the comeuppance of an evil act will be. That's what the Buddha said. And in terms of rebirth, it could be a few lifetimes ahead of us. So it's the same with somebody who also kills and holds wrong view, but he's ended up in a happy destination. So earlier he's done a good action, which was pleasant, and he's done and later he's done a good action, which is pleasant. So at some point in his life, he's done things that are wholesome and good, and therefore, upon his death, he might be reborn in a happy realm. But still, he will experience the result of all that killing and all that bad stuff, either in a future rebirth or some other subsequent rebirth. And so the same with the other two, you see. So in other words, the teaching here is that you just don't know what's going to happen. But you know, generally speaking, that the law, the karmic law, will actually, should we say, manifest itself in the fullness of time. So they talk about supportive karma and destructive karma. So, for instance, just on a very simple level, if you happen to upset somebody by something you've said, it doesn't take much to go up and say, look, I'm sorry about that. So the first was some bad karma there, and it would have had perhaps some bad results later on. Person might hate you and do all sorts of nasty things to get their own back. But because you've apologized, you've stopped that karma. So it's the same the other way too. You might do something which is wholesome, but then you do something silly, and you ruin the possibility of that reward. So it's a whole sort of mishmash. And when you put it on all the laws that we talked about, the natural laws and the sea and the genetic laws and all that, and then when you put on top of that the idea that everything is contingent, that you haven't a clue what's going to happen next, if we're absolutely real about the life we're living, then abandon any hope of working out your karma. See, the Buddha said it would drive us mad. So we've got to, as I say, not worry about it at all. The worry that we should have is that we are doing things which are wholesome and therefore will have eventually good results. So that, in a sense, covers the sort of main stuff about karma. I will put onto the website this this book by I've mentioned him before, Venerable Payutto. He's a Thai academic monk, and he's written and his books are very clear. They're very straightforward. Unfortunately, they're in a sort of copied PDF form. They're not actually ebooks as such. But even so, they're worth downloading. So I'll put that up on the website. They're not being, as far as I can see, they're not being printed anymore. So that means if you do get a copy, it's quite costly. But as I say, you can get a PDF downloaded. So those I'll put that up onto the website. And the last thing is, of course, to invite you tomorrow evening to our June full moon observance. I hope you can join us there. So remember that it's 15 minutes before. So that's about 10 to 8. It's a little bit earlier than we normally meet. And hopefully it takes, especially for those of you who've committed to the path, it's a lovely opportunity just to retake the refuges and precepts. Okay, so I do hope you can join me there, and I hope that our little exposition of karma hasn't been too confusing, and that you've got the general message that we've got to act, we've got to think, speak, and act in wholesome and skillful ways, and then we don't have to worry about anything. I can only hope my words have been of some assistance, and that you will, by your practice, soon be liberated from all suffering. Sooner rather than later. Forgot that bit. Very good. We can do a bit of practice.